Thank you again for joining us today for our professional development webinar series. Today we have coffee with Kia Weatherspoon. She is our chapter's former student representative to the board. If you don't know Kia, you should. And as she said it herself, I'm going to say this, so please excuse my friend. She's here because she's done shit. So, please go read her bio later. You know her, you love her. She is here with us today. She is moderating our panel today is our student representative to the board-elect, Lindsay Bedford, who is a master's candidate at Drexel University in the Interiors Architecture program. She will be in now what Kia's role was when she was with the chapter when she was at Moore. So just so anybody knows, with our student representative to the board, they are actually a sitting board member. They have a right to vote. They are one of the 9 board members. So it is not just it is an appointed position where the student will send in a resume and it'll be decided on by the board, but it is actually a sitting board member. So it holds a lot of value. ASID is the oldest and largest and only design organization where its members encompass all aspects of design, from residential to healthcare to multifamily housing, commercial, hospitality, you name it. And our motto is design impacts lives. We just finished up our national virtual conference. Kia was on a panel the other day. I'm sad that I did not get to see it because we were in a session with board members, but I'll be able to watch it later. But we have, with our State of the Society, there is a new mission statement that we are ASID, the association that empowers members to have a positive impact on the people and planet through collaboration, design, thinking, education, and advocacy. Interior design will advance its value proposition through evolving practices and business landscapes with a diverse and well-prepared professional community. And interior design professionals and their teams will be at the forefront of positive change in the communities in which we work, play, live, heal, and learn. So it's just a nice new statement from ASID on our belief system of our society. We first also want to thank our chapter sponsors who, without their support of our chapter, events like this are not possible. Our Ruby sponsors, our top level sponsors, are Bright Light Design Center, Fessenden Hall Incorporated. Our Amethyst sponsors are Cravat, Hunter Douglas, Kiefer's Appliances, Benjamin Moore, and Dow Tile. So we thank them highly. Just to give you a little update, our chapter's annual meeting, it's our kind of recap of the year, our look forward, it's our transition of our board. It's usually a really fun party we have every year, but it will be virtual on Zoom. You can see where you can register. It is free for everyone to attend, so please take time to sign up. And then the creme de la creme is our 2020 Interior Design Awards and ASID's 45th anniversary celebration. This was to have been held in person in May, then I got moved to October, and now it's November. But you can sign up right there with the Philadelphia Interior Design Awards.com. We had the highest number of entries ever, with over 150 entries in 27 categories. Over 60 firms from commercial to residential in the Philadelphia area entered. So please tune in. It is free to attend. Donations are greatly accepted. And you can sign in on that website to attend as well. So, and the last thing before I turn this over to Lindsay and Kia and mute myself is that if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A feature within the Zoom. And after the presentation, please feel free to put any questions to the direction of Liz Kane, our Professional Development Director. It's Professional Development at PAE, which is for Pennsylvania East.asid.org. And without further ado, I am going to stop sharing and turn this over to the ladies.
All right, thank you, Kim. And thank you again, Kia, for chatting with me today. As mentioned, today's conversation is an important one, and I hope it will answer the question that has been on the hearts and minds of many recently, and I hope it will really just help to shed some light. And that question is, what's next? As we all know, 2020 has been a difficult and challenging year in many ways. One of the most difficult and also eye-opening parts of this past year was that America was forced to confront some deep-rooted racial issues in our society. Across the nation, people began to speak out and fight against injustice. But now the time has come to discuss our next steps. I'm really excited to chat with Kia today about her thoughts on the next steps for Black individuals and allies, next steps for companies big and small, and what is Kia currently doing at her company Determined by Design today. I wanted to speak with Kia specifically because I personally view Kia as an expert. Kia has spent the last Kia has spent the last 15 years advocating for design equity and championing the view that good design is not a luxury, but a standard for all. Aside from interior design, Kia is an advocate and an educator in business leadership, equity, and diversity. I know that Kia believes change is possible when difficult conversations happen, and I hope that's what we can accomplish today. Kia, I'm really excited for us to talk.
Me too. I'm so excited to be back in PA East, virtually, but I'm really excited. Thank you.
Yes, we're definitely happy to have you come home. Feels really great to know that, someone like you made your start here with us at PA ASID East. And I know especially for me, as the student rep to the board-elect, I feel like I now have some big shoes to fill, but I'm excited. I'm
but
really
that was a long time ago. You good.
No, I'm
gonna
really
say how long, but
yeah, they don't need to know. But I'm really happy for us to have this conversation today, especially for our chapter to be the one having this important conversation. So let's get into it. So I know you've been fighting for design equity for some years now, but of course you did not start your interior design journey in this way. When did you first realize that there were inequalities in design and that all spaces are not created with design equity in mind?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I always like to tell the first experience I had with design, I don't think I knew it. It came from a personal experience. When I was younger, my brother was incarcerated, and he was incarcerated for 15 years. And it started this kind of journey with my family of going to prison institutions and facilities. And I think it was around, year 2 or 3 where I was like, oh my God, this is a shitty experience as a visitor, as someone coming to visit a loved one. The next year I started to think like, oh God, look at all these kids coming in here to visit their fathers, predominantly men of color, right? Black and brown men. And then I started looking around like for the workers, for the guards, for the staff. It was like, man, they're here sometimes 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is shitty for them too. And then it was really like, oh, these men, right? These men are in this disenfranchised environment. And it really made me start to question, what's the punishment here? Inadequate facilities or being isolated from your family and your loved ones. So I think that was that first spark of me looking at how people experience spaces and specifically how disenfranchised and people of color experience space. And I think I was probably around 15 or 16 at that point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it seems like pretty early on you saw how bad design can have negative effects on those who inhabit those spaces. Can you tell me about when you realized that good design can have positive effects on people and their emotions?
So I think, the good design is subjective. And I think for me, it was more so like, I think I realized space could heal you and change you when I was deployed overseas in the military. Right after, in a roundabout way, I got into the Air Force and I got to my first duty station a little bit before September 11th. And then September 11th happened and I was on my first of 5 deployments to the Middle East. And it was in a tent at Al Udeid Air Base with 14 other women that I needed to cry, and I didn't have privacy to do that or respite. So I took some sheets and I hung it from the top of my tent, and I made 3 sheet walls. And that was the first space I ever created. And I bawled like a baby for 15 minutes. And it was something about how that space healed me and brought me comfort. And it wasn't fancy finishes, but it was just so powerful. And I will have to do that 4 more times over the course of 5 years, creating these safe havens for myself. And when I got out of the military, I was like, I want to do this thing where I create spaces for people that heals them. And I don't think Google was around then, but that led me to interior design. And I think that's when I realized the power of space that it can have on someone's life. And that's a bare minimum, like, okay, this is a thing and it's important. But that was that kind of second kind of like aha light bulb moment that truly led me to interior design.
That's really interesting to hear. And it just makes me think about how I mentioned, like, design, when done well, or even just doesn't have to necessarily be done well, but if it provides what the person who is there needs, it's doing its job. And that's what we're here for, to help make a better place, a more comfortable, a more user-friendly, better experiences for people. So it seems like these 2 experiences clearly had a very powerful impact on you and shaped your personal views on interior design and, of course, how you operate your company, Determined by Design. Can you tell me about some of your earlier projects and how they helped you to define your mission at Determined by Design?
Oh, absolutely. So a couple things, right? My 2 origin stories, people like, oh, that's cool. And I think if you really think about it, right, I came to design through prisons and war. That's a pretty extreme way to get to interior design. And a lot of the conversations I've been having recently is, you know, well, how come I got there through these extreme experiences? So how come I didn't immediately start doing design, you know, equitable design? I think what's marketed to us as students is do the sexy work, multifamily, luxury, hotels and retail, right? It's put out there to us that this is a luxury thing. So the very early parts of my career were focusing on these more luxury market segments. And it wasn't until I started my business, the first thing I did was a nonprofit project for domestic violence survivors. And it was kind of funny because most people are like, you don't start a business and then do free work. But it was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I started working with this organization called Room to Rebloom. And the project was to redesign 2 common areas in the supportive housing building. And it was these 2 basement spaces. And I go in there and I'm all excited and enthusiastic. And the women are like, first of all, calm down. Second of all, they said, we don't need this. Like, they just could not envision that someone providing a beautiful, well-designed space was something that they needed. So we take them through the design process, and it goes from, I don't need this, to, oh my God, someone would do this for us. Oh, I thought I could only see this stuff on TV. Is this something I could do one day? Right? And, you know, interior design is always about the big reveal and the pretty. Yes, the space was pretty, but when we finished, the woman said to me, Miss Kia, when I walked into this room, I realized change was possible for me. And right then I knew the people who need access to well-designed spaces the most, they don't know they don't have it, they don't know they need it, and they don't have an advocate. So I've built my entire practice around being that advocate and making sure those who needed the most had access to well-designed spaces. And that took me down this path of focusing on affordable, low-income, transitional, and supportive housing. But it's probably one of the best things I've ever done, starting my business with a mission, with a mission mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That is a really powerful story. And it makes me think too about how, I know at Determined by Design, you really focus on concept and, you know, concept is one of those things that really breathes life into a design and makes it special and really helps it to speak to those who are using that space. I know oftentimes in our field, we talk about concept and it can very easily get lost along the way to make room for other things that are deemed more important or budget cuts. We all know what happens. But for you, how does making conceptual storytelling the driving force of the design help to encourage design equity?
So the you know, I think what happens is, as an industry, we're caught up in style. This is mid-century modern and contemporary, all this kind of fluff, right? But when you are going into any community that's being revitalized or gentrified, right? And one of the biggest thing is, you know, how does the history of those communities stay in place? How do the people who lived in those communities, how do their stories survive when what's fresh and new is desired and not what was there? So for me, concept development, or the idea of storytelling, is really about bringing the history of a community into a space, right? When a neighborhood transitions, you need to see who was there before you, who paved the way, who got less than. So for us, developing a concept is the way that we do that. And I think what you're seeing on the screen is, you know, one of our projects that we're working on called Berry Farm. It's one of the largest public housing redevelopments happening in Washington, D.C. right now. And this project has a big spotlight on it, primarily because of displacement, gentrification, in a major metropolitan city like Washington, D.C. So our concept for this project was opening the senses of ascension. And I like to walk through how we get there, because a lot of times people think it's, well, biophilic, and the juxtaposition is, no, what's the story? What's the context? So Berry Farm is one of the early post-war industrial housing complexes that was supposed to be built for Black and brown soldiers and workers, right? Over the years, it's since become a project, pretty much. But some of DC's most historical and prominent figures have come through this community, right? The Junkyard Band, Eartha Kitt, Peaches and Herbs. And then one of the founders of the overall development was Howard Schultz, who founded the Yard at Howard University. And that if you know anything about Washington, D.C., it's literally go-go music is the heart of D.C. So it really came about, our concept, from all these historical references and cultures and points. And the community is called Hillsdale, where people, you know, what does a hill do? It subtly rises and falls. Go-go music is all of the sensory experience, touch, sight, sound. So our concept became opening the senses to ascension. So for us, it was about creating these moments of movement that moved your eye, it uplifted your eye, it ascended you, but it also created this interactive experience. And if we can go to the next slide, this is a rendering of that space. So we started to do these, you guys can't see me moving my mouth, but we started to do these bold ceiling moments. But the main interactive feature was what you see on the right-hand side is, as people move throughout this lobby, you will see the names of all these historical prominent fixtures from the community illuminate on that wall. So we want you to move through this space, but we also really want you to experience the history, and that's concept development. That's how we're maintaining the fabric of this community through design. So in 5-10 years, if this building transitions from affordable housing to a market rate building, look, the little young white couple, you will realize this was a Black community, and these are the people who were integral to where it is today and the space that you're in. That's why the concept development piece is so important, to maintain those narratives, and that was the historical reference point.
Got it. Yeah, so really it sounds like story is king. Story is most important.
Story is queen.
Story is queen, right? What am I saying?
Story is queen.
Story is queen.
Story is queen, girl. Story is queen. Story is queen.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is one of those things, right? We take a lot of you know, concepts, sometimes you see pictures of other interiors. No, for us, it's about movements and structures and shapes, things that are reminiscent of the community. This is the Goodman League part. These are really important moments and kind of design decisions that we make from that storytelling perspective.
Nice, nice. That's really, I personally, concept, at least for me in school, concept is definitely the driving force for everything I do.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's, without it, there's nothing. There's really nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I really appreciate that's something that you focus on. And it seems like, based off of what we have discussed so far, it seems like that for you, one of the best ways to give people agency and a voice is to have their story told. But for you,
Exactly.
of course, that's with design. But stepping aside from design specifically, how do you think this same concept can be used to potentially create change on a broader scale in the Black community and in other underrepresented communities as well?
So I think that you know, you implement change by really examining the root of the issues, right? If you look at most affordable low-income housing, depending on what major metropolitan area you're in, right? It's predominantly people of color. And historically, and still currently today, those spaces look like shit. And I think it matters because I hear these stories from designers all the time. How did you get to design? My grandfather was a GC. My mom was a designer. My dad was an architect. It's all this kind of generational and familial legacy, right? Or I grew up in this house and I rearranged my room all the time and it's blah, 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 blah. But if you think about people growing up in low-income housing, it's probably overpopulated, too small, poor indoor air quality, dismal materials, no natural light. So what inspiration are they finding in their own home, right? In their own dwellings that they go into every day. So for me, this idea of connecting the dots to, if a person is disenfranchised by the space that they're in their own home, that's a damn service, right? We are not exposing them to an elevated experience that can inspire them to say, hey, can I do this one day? Can I do this one day without having to go to war, without having to go to a prison facility, without having to go to, you know, a crappy dialysis center with my grandma, right? Without having to go to a community center and thinking like, this community center sucks, I wish something could be better. I think this is why space matters in communities of color, because if we don't focus on the design at that kind of initial touch point, then we're setting them up for constantly experiencing disenfranchised spaces. And I think that's the true connection between design, community, and really bringing an agency for people, specifically people of color, to feel like they deserve more than the status quo.
Yes. You know, actually, earlier before we spoke, I actually was looking at some of the really interesting articles and things out of featuring you currently. And I was wondering, actually, I know I'm stepping off topic a little bit, but I learned something when I was reading one of those articles. I was wondering if maybe you'd like to touch upon a bit for the audience to talk about an issue that you found in these low-income housing with the eyes at the entrance.
Yes. So, you know, I hate this language. Any developer who does affordable low-income housing, right? They say we need to have eyes on the door, and it's like, what does that mean, right? And I only know the non-PC way to say things. It's like, okay, they're poor, they're gonna tear shit up, so we need to make sure at all times we see them when they walk into the front door. And it oftentimes results in you walk into your front door and then there's storefront everywhere, like, because someone's watching you, right? Now, mind you, there's also security cameras, right? So it's this double layer of just an insensitive mentality and mindset that these people need to be watched. They need to be policed. could you imagine walking into your front door feeling like, oh, someone has to see me. I have to be seen by the camera in case I do anything bad. And I think when you in a low income community, right? If you go walk across the corner to the corner store or the bank or the post office, in those kind of lower income communities, they got plexiglass right in front of them. So even in every touch point in the buildings you go into your community, everything screams, you should be watched. What does that do to the psyche of a child? Say they're coming in and out of the building just twice a day, every day, to go to and from school, right? Every time you walk in for the next, say you're a school-age kid, 12 years, that's roughly around 35,000 hours of feeling like you need to be watched. If that doesn't weigh on your soul and create a trauma, then I don't know what will. I think it's that construct of watching someone and policing them that is so indignified. You shouldn't see that in any housing setting, market rate, low income, whatever you want to call it. These are people, these are their homes, and that's the first experience that really matters. And when I walked into the space that it's a video on my Instagram feed, I was triggered. It immediately took me right back to walking into a visitation center to go visit my brother in a prison facility. That's how stark this design was, because there was an interior designer on that project, right? Some architect just arbitrarily thought, keep the eyes on the door, just watch them. And I think this is where design, if there was an empathetic lens, if there was a diverse perspective to that design solution, where someone might have had an experience or thought culturally, maybe this isn't correct, maybe there could have been a different design outcome.
Yes. You know, I asked you that question specifically because today I wanted to be educational. And that's the kind of thing, these are the kinds of conversations and things that people should be aware of. I'm an African American. I never knew anything about that. And I was shocked. And I heard that and it troubled me. And I just, yeah, there's a lot that's having this conversation today, because there's a lot of important things that people need to become aware of. And when you're aware, knowledge is power. And that is how we can make positive steps to move forward and make changes like you've already been making, which is great to see. But speaking about what has been going on, all of that, obviously we saw earlier this summer a lot of companies, schools, religious organizations, etc. They were all stepping up publicly, predominantly on social media, to take a stance to speak out against racial injustice. As someone who has already been advocating for the Black community professionally, what would you recommend be the next steps for these organizations? What would those look like to you?
You know, so it's so funny. I don't want to say I'm dated, right? But I'm just kind of like, to me, put your money where your mouth is, right? And start within. And I think, you know, one of the things that everything that's happening is unveiled is that within companies, both large and small, right? We all know our industry is not diverse. But the stories of disenfranchisement that I've heard from Black and minority designers, it is real. And I've been a little bit sheltered because I quickly after I started my career, I went and started my own firm, right? And one of the things I heard a lot was, oh, I don't, you know, as a designer of color, I don't get paid equal to my counterparts, my white counterparts. Oh, as a designer of color, I don't really get any leadership roles. Oh, as a designer of color, I'm just trotted out when they need a diverse space. So for me, the true next step is do a pay audit of all your minorities and employees of color. That's where you start. The minute the solution that you make affects your bottom line, that's how I know you truly care. Donating to organizations and nonprofits, it's great. But if you're not even paying and giving opportunities to the people who are in your company, then you're still a part of the problem, right? If you're not being intentional in your hiring practices, you're still a part of the problem, right? And I think it's also understanding that the pipeline for designers of color, it's pretty limited, because we just already acknowledged it's been decades of disenfranchisement within firms, both small and large. So you're going to also have to be patient with your hiring to make sure you find truly diverse candidates, but then also give them a little bit of grace, because they've been, and I don't like to use these like dramatic words, but they've been traumatized, right? So they might not be able to come out and be that star that you need to be, because there's a breakdown of trust there, right? I think these are things that organizations, tangible steps that they can do. Think about creating mentorship programs, not just at the collegiate level, but at the high school and the middle school level, because we have to now start cultivating that pipeline. I think firms should also be being more strategic with partnering with minority-led firms. And the key word I said is minority-led, right? There needs to be leadership of color at the table making decisions. These are steps that firms can do right now. But you gotta start with your wallet internally. I think that's the key thing for me.
Yes, yes. You know what? I really appreciate how you mentioned mentorship. I know for me as a student, I especially very much value mentorship in these professional experiences I have currently, because it's not just about money. It really is, it's a learning experience and trying to learn and grow and gain new skills, so that when I do graduate, I am really ready and strong and prepared to be that employee that really can take it to the next level. But it shouldn't just be for students. Learning is a continuous process, especially in our field. There's always more to learn. The learning never stops. And I'm really
absolutely
mention that, because that is something any company, design or not, needs to be thinking about. So aside from bigger organizations like companies, schools, etc., I'd like to discuss on an individual level as well. First, I'd like to talk about allies. I know there's already a lot of information out there to help educate allies, but what do you personally feel is something else an ally should know or be aware of that maybe isn't out there right now?
This is going to be I think it's one thing I have some allies right now, right? And then he's like, oh my God, you do affordable low-income housing. And then they go, well, can we donate something? Do we need to donate light fixtures to your project? Can we donate some discontinued material? And it's like, please don't assume because I do low-income work that now I need a handout, right? That is pity. That doesn't make you an ally. That's making the assumption because we do this project type, we are in need. So I think for me, allies it's a very fine line of wanting to help and wanting to be an ally and wanting to be like a savior. And while the intention is like, it's a good intention, but it's also kind of like, well, you know, that's still part of the problem, right? Your assumption is all poor people need to be saved, or because the Black designer is doing low income housing, now she needs a handout. Oh, you do affordable housing? Does that mean you do the work for free? No, I'm a very lucrative for-profit business, right? So I think our allies should take pause and be like, what is the intent here? Are you making suggestions out of guilt or saviorism? But I don't need a handout. I need you to be empowering this next wave of designers who are still, frankly, predominantly young white designers of color or young white designers to use their voice to advocate for better design outcomes. That's how you can be an ally right now. I need you to take a strong look at architectural and interior design firms. What does their market rate work look like compared to their affordable housing and or community work? And if there's a disconnect, call them out on the inequities in their design outcomes. I think it's acknowledging that they exist. As allies, you can remove the labels that you associate with what can go in what type of project, right? A lot of times people say to me, oh, well, you can't use that because that's not institutional furniture or senior furniture. And it's like, design is design, right? Stop designing to a demographic and or label and design for all people, period, point blank. I think this is what we need our allies to do. Remove the labels and start thinking of everyone as a person, right? And putting an empathetic lens on how you approach people. That's how you become an ally. That was a very long answer, but got me going.
No, I like it. And, you know, I think about too, I know at Determined by Design, you really focus on not labeling. You know, it's not a senior living project, so it has to look this way. It's not a low-income housing, so it has to look this way. You have standards. You have standards for what you believe to be good design and what people deserve, and that is what you always keep to, which is very much appreciated.
And that's the thing, because we did this little exercise where I took a design firm through a series of photos, right? And I was like, well, who is this space for? And it was like a little shitty, like multi-purpose room. And then there was this fancy kind of lobby communal area. And the shitty room, they were like, oh, that's affordable institutional. And the fancy one, they were like, oh, that's market rate luxury. And then I flipped it on them and was like, well, actually, what you thought was market rate luxury was our affordable housing work. You should not be able to tell the difference between affordable housing, low income housing, Class A work, Class C. There is no difference. Design is just design, and think about approaching it that way at all times.
Yes, yes, very much so. I know we spoke about allies, but now I'd like to talk about Black individuals. As African Americans, I think a lot, I know for me personally, I think a lot recently about my role in facilitating change in this movement, but I also seek balance. And I know many African Americans have been called to spearhead initiatives at work, at school. They're being asked to educate and convert people to allies. But this can be very exhausting. We're busy too. We have full-time jobs. We have school. We have relationships. We have kids. We have lives just like everyone else. And it can be kind of an unfair burden. What are your recommendations for those like me who are seeking balance? What are our next steps?
You know, learn to say no, period, right? And here's why. You know, the best thing I think any designer of color can do right now is be exceptional at their craft, right? Not put this pressure on themselves to undo decades and decades and decades of disenfranchisement within our industry, right? I think, you know, we have this desire, especially the Black woman. She's so strong and she wants to put everybody on their back. Well, if you don't get yourself through the door because you're carrying everyone else with you, then you're not going to go that far. So for me, it's giving yourself grace to say, frankly, no, I'm okay. Thank you. No. And being okay with that. We don't have to save our industry. We do have to be the example and mentor for the next generation, but don't feel like you have to take on that burden. It's a very, very fine line, but also, you know, do it in moderation. And for me, I was very conscious of like, look, I'm not going to be up here doing a lot of D&I panels. And sometimes, like you said, I have other things to do. For me, it's not about right this moment. What is the legacy I'm building 10, 20, 30 years from now? It's don't think about the right now work. Sometimes the biggest example that you can set or change you can make is by being the best designer that you can be. And I think my mindset has always been, I win all the awards, I get all the press, not for me. So the Lindsays, the Ashleys, the Rodneys, the Ericas, the Patrices, they know if I can do this, you can do this. And just my presence is enough. Not to be on a D&I committee and a council and all that other stuff. Do the work, show up, be great, and bring at least 5 other people along with you. I didn't say carry them, but mentor, sponsor, bring them with you, uplift each other. That's what I think designers of color can do right now.
I really appreciate that message, because I know I think about how can I help? Like, how can I help? Specifically as a student, I think about my community at Drexel. And I know when, earlier this summer when things were really, really happening, one of the things I thought was most important was I wanted to make sure I used my voice. And I wanted to make sure I used my voice to show people, most importantly, I'm a person. I'm just a person. And I'm your friend. I'm your classmate. I'm your colleague. And just be here for me. Help support me, because I know I have some work to do. It's not my job to educate everyone, but I do personally feel very strongly that I have a voice that must be used to spread a very important message, but also just be here. Like maybe I need someone to just fall back on really quickly. It's hard, like you said, it is hard.
That's real. That's real. I mean, and this is the thing. Some days I was telling someone, some days I just wake up feeling just like heavy, right? It's just like there's this weight on me, and it's kind of like, you know what? Let me offload it. I think we can still use our voices, but not carry the burden. Because outside of our industry and everything, there's our own personal struggles. So it's like I can't be all things for all people if I'm not something for myself first.
That's right. And like you said, it's very important for people to realize, like, yes, as Black women, we are strong. All women are strong, but also, like, I'm not a mythical creature. I'm a real person.
No, right now, person.
Yeah, I'm a real person, just like you. And remember that we're the same. We're equal.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing for people to remember. But now it has been some months. Black Lives Matter isn't necessarily at the forefront of our news stories, or our Instagram feeds, or our Facebook timelines. What would you say are your recommendations for keeping up momentum and just ensuring that this isn't just a social media hashtag or a fad, that this is something we are really making the changes that need to be made?
I think that sometimes the only thing that you can do is keep doing the work, whatever the work is for you. Keep doing the work and realizing that some things are greater than yourself, and do things from a place of being in service of others. That's really, for me, it's kind of like, if I started to try to figure out, what rally can I be at? What thing can I donate to? I would exhaust myself. And I just think, find ways within your own community, within yourself. Make sure the path that you're on is about changing and impacting lives. I think that's what we can do. Be cognizant of your relationships and partnerships, where you're spending your money, both your relationships and money spending with your vendors and manufacturers, and also who you're partnering with in your personal life and in your professional life. Make sure those relationships are intentional, and with firms and people and vendors and manufacturers of colors. Those are small steps that you can still, Black Lives Matter, but also Black businesses, the Black dollar, right? Those are things that you can constantly pour into in small ways. But that's what I've tried to do, right? And then I'm gonna sound like a broken horse, and then give myself grace. When I'm tired, I'm tired. When I need to stop, I stop. But I can't solve it all right now. I just have to stay steady and stay true to the long-term game, the long game and the long-term mission, which for me is this focus on design equity, right? What is my mission, the lives I want to change, not just right now because it's trendy, but when I started 10 years ago, and I'll continue to do it until housing outcomes are equal, and frankly, until there's not two buildings, there's one building that's integrated and everyone lives in. I think find your true mission and focus and stay the course on that. That's my greatest success, is me building momentum and continuing down my path in this mission. That's what I think you should do. Find your path, not you, Lindsay, but find your path, do it in service of others, and just continue to do the work. That's the most important thing for me.
Yes. Really, honestly, what it sounds like you're saying, kind of sounds like what we all as interior designers set out to do already. It's what we learned, you know, we really are out here trying to make the world a better place with the spaces we create, and to really, you know, I think the next generation of designers, design equity should be in the forefront of our designs, our concepts, and we're really helping to create a new future, which is exciting. I know I'm personally excited to be part of that. Definitely.
I think, you know, I'm excited too. I think this next generation of designers is very apparent. You know, they just don't, they want to design for an impact, not just the pretty, and that gives me hope. Not just designers of color, but white designers. I've met so many young designers who are like, you know what, design is more than just pretty finishes. It's not about I do residential hospitality this, it's how do I change lives. So that gives me, you know, hope and solace at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, very much so. Well, I feel like I always have so many questions when I think about like just the things you say and reading the articles that you've been part of. I know I very much value your opinion, Kia. I'm really excited you chatted with me today. And I know also our audience too, obviously they have to have some questions. I wanted to take a look while we have some time. So everyone, please, if you have any questions, now is the time. Get it while it's hot. I'm going to check and see
a question.
We have one. Ooh, okay. This is a long one. I'm going to read it out. This is from Rosalind Wyatt. She says, Kia, I am a green building and sustainability consultant who works on all kinds of projects, including LEED, sites, enterprise green, etc. One of my main interests is on green and sustainable, affordable, and LIH for the Black community. I'm pushing to get more of these buildings to be built green. Hopefully there is a way for all of us in this space to connect. Also, we should get more young Black kids to go into green interior design, building design and construction, and building performance and maintenance. I'm gonna say this is asking you for your thoughts.
Okay. All right. I wish I could be like, let's talk about it. Okay, here we go. So this is my thing, right? Years ago, you know, projects should be green, not because it could get a label and a gold sticker, right? I feel like if we brought this sustainable approach to design, because that's just how it should be, right? I think inherently using green, healthier building materials, that should be the standard. And I think all design, it shouldn't be specific to green interior design, but as designers, we should always be designing from a place of sustainability, health, and I sometimes it's hard for me to get caught up in the labels. But you know, I will say one of our clients in Boston called POA, and they do work all over, but they're really big on kind of like buildings and standards, not because they're supposed to, but because that's just the way the industry is trending. So the good thing is that manufacturing is allowing us to make these design types of sustainable and green design decisions easier. But the disconnect, I feel like, is when it's at a premium. If we're still paying more for the sustainable material, then we're doing it from a capitalistic standpoint, not for the greater good of people.
Right, exactly. And obviously, especially now more than ever, our health and well-being should be taken into account when creating and building spaces for us to inhabit. And again, health shouldn't just be for a few. Health is a right everyone should have. Everyone deserves to feel safe and like they can thrive in their environment.
We have another question from Ananda.
Yes, we actually have some questions in the chat and in the Q&A.
Oh.
I'm gonna mix it up a bit. Yeah, let's go with our question from Ananda. She asked, how do you implement a cultural approach to design when competing against traditional European aesthetics? That's a good one.
Oh, so Ananda, that's easy. Concept, right? So this is the thing. For me, it's not about just saying, you know, I'm going to use these kind of Afrocentric textiles and patterns and vernacular in my design just because. I think inherently our cultural experiences will come out through the design process, but you have to start with the community concept and context. That's how I don't want to say combat the traditional European aesthetic and approach. It's what's the concept. And I think sometimes, not all the time, but people of color from different ethnicities, not just Black, I think it's our cultural and heritage experiences that if we weave those into our design vernacular and style, that's how we can kind of shift from this kind of traditional European aesthetic. But again, it's also stop adopting these stylized vernaculars like mid-century modern and contemporary and all those kind of stylized things that we see. I think is we have to change our language and think, what's the story, what's the context, and allow the cultural connections of your team, which is why your design team needs to be diverse, so we can shift that narrative of these kind of predominantly Eurocentric design aesthetics. I hope that answers your question. If not, you can reach out to me and we'll follow up.
And I know also, you know, like we talked about earlier, you specifically, at least in Determined by Design, try to tell the story of the community or whoever the client is that you're designing for. So if it happens to be, you know, an African-American community in an area that was rich with jazz, a rich jazz history or something,
yes,
that's what you focus on. It's not about, you know, oh, because post-war modernism is what we should be doing. You're doing what is best for the client and what fits their narrative, which is nice to see. Well, actually, in that train of thought, we have a question from Bhavna Singh. Sorry if I said that incorrectly. Hey, I'm Bhavna, and I'm an interior designer from India. I wanted to ask, how can I make Indian designing style popular worldwide?
Oh, I think, you know, it's not about making something popular worldwide. It's about using your cultural aesthetic as it connects to the project, right? I think to me, that's the most important thing. Does it connect to the community and the project as a whole? But I think it's also starting partnering. Look at partnering opportunities with manufacturers, companies. How can you partner with them as a designer? And that way your cultural experience and heritage can come out. So it's not how you can make Indian style design popular, but who can you partner with to help uplift that aesthetic and that voice in the right applicable project where it makes the context make sense. Is that fair? I always ask like they can tell me. Is that fair?
Right. Well, answer yes, it's fair. No, I think that I agree with your answer as well. Really about like uplifting or boosting, if you will. And actually, in that train of thought, we have a question from Sarah Kennedy with regards to helping to uplift and boosting. She says, "Hi, my question is, how can a white designer help to boost the well-being and equality of the Black community?"
I think, you know, I think the biggest disconnect is, you know, Sarah, you should approach every design in the Black community like, is this good enough for my loved one? And I think, you know, challenge your developer, your client, whoever the person is writing you the check. I think challenge their design decisions. You can also check their implicit bias, right? And how is that helping the Black community? A lot of times we'll have developers say, well, you know, I told the designer I like checkerboard floors, and he or she just did what I said. And I think it's that type of mindset of like, okay, this is in a low income community and this is what the client, whatever wants, then this is what we're going to do. I think having a voice to challenge inadequate design decisions, I think that is what white designers can do, because predominantly still, unfortunately, it is a lot of design firms of color working on white firms working on low income housing. So we need our white allies to be really trying to design these spaces like, man, when I want my kid there, my husband, my spouse, whoever. That's, I think, what you can do to boost, to help the well-being of the Black community. But also, if you do feel lost, bring in a counterpart of color, right? Find a Black design firm, a community leader, a student, or someone, partner, bring them in, give them agency into the conversation. I think that's what you can do as a white designer to help boost the well-being and equality of Black communities, building relationships, not just for right now, but for the long term. Sarah, I hope that answered your question.
Now it looks like, let's see, I don't think we have any other questions, but I know I do. As student representative to the board, you know, I have to look out for the students. I have questions for us. Just a few. Really, I just wanted to know, before we end today, I know it's getting close to 1, but what is your advice? What would you say are just food for thought, things for us to think about, not just for young Black designers, but for all of us? What can we do to be really agents of change in our field when we graduate and we're no longer students, but we are the people out here designing and creating the spaces of the future?
I think the one thing that you could do is to remember to always ask why, right? Ask why for understanding, not just once, not just twice, 3, 4, or 5 times, right? As long as you are constantly asking why as a designer, you're asking for understanding. And when you can ask for understanding, that is how you can implement an empathetic approach to your design. I think this next generation of designers should be just constantly questioning and challenging, not challenging in a disrespectful way, but challenging for a new, fresh approach. And to do that, you got to understand why. Why has it always been this way? Why? How do we change it? Or what if we do it this other way? Why? This is what what students can do. Ask why to implement change. And I think stop looking for transactional relationships. I just want to get a job. I want to do this, right? Build a relationship. You know, a lot of students right now, you know, they like, oh, you got to get a job. No, you should be focused on building relationships. And I think in this kind of pandemic environment, you should be doing handwritten notes and letters and connecting and learning people's stories and journeys, again, so you can have a greater sense of understanding for other people, not just, well, I want to get a job. I think that's what students can do right now.
Yes. So really It all comes down to people. Connect with
Oh,
people. Or
I'm sorry. I see a question from Marie about education, design education.
we do. So yes, actually, hey Drexel, Marie,
Oh,
you are not too late, Marie. How do you design education shifting to help change the narrative for design students?
so Marie, I'm going to tell you something. I teach now again, right? And I stopped teaching like three years ago because boy, the microaggression of these like kind of privileged white women was real, right? It was real, and I was like, I just don't want to do that in an academic setting. And I went to go see, I went to go speak at a school, BCU, earlier in the year, and this Black student said to me, I was the first Black designer of color she ever saw. And she said to me, I was literally thinking of quitting my program because my classmates don't look like me and my teachers don't look like me. And I think for education, and then IDEC, they put out a picture of something on LinkedIn, and they used all white people, predominantly white women. Education, you all need to be getting in these firms and asking, begging, pleading for adjunct faculty members of color. I cannot stress that enough, because what I'm hearing from these students is, well, I didn't feel like my white teacher really had agency into me as she did my white classmates. That's a real experience for these, and I don't want to say kids, but for these emerging designers. They are not seeing themselves in the classroom. They are not seeing themselves in the curriculum. We are constantly creating curriculum that labels residential is this, healthcare is this, luxury is this. What is design, right? We are not teaching them that designing for communities is not just, it is a lucrative and successful career path. I need educators. You need to look for speakers of color. And I'm getting upset because for years I hear this. In 2020, no student should say they've never seen a designer of color. You need to be recruiting. You need to be in neighborhoods. You need to have requirements in your curriculum where your design students need to go to middle school and high school to educate on what interior designers do. You guys need to be in these communities of color. That is how you're going to build a pipeline. But your faculty, it has to be diverse. And I think the great thing about COVID is there are a lot of faculty members available that can teach virtually, but that's what I think education needs to do right now.
Yes. And I know, especially as mentioned, as a student, I very much value being able to have a variety of opinions, a variety of different kinds of people to help educate me on this journey I have, because I've always felt that the more opinions, the more different viewpoints you have, you can really make a very well-rounded perspective for yourself. So I really appreciate that question from Marie. Thank you. I know we had another comment that said that there's so many more questions they wanted to ask, but that's okay. That's why we had the email that was shown earlier on the slide. If you wanted to reach out, you can contact Liz Kane at professional development at, I'm sorry, that slide, PAASID. It's a very long email. I'm sorry.
Lindsay, it's professional development at pae.asid.org.
Thank you, Kim. Yes, I was hoping to get that out there. A bit of a Friday brain here, but I know I learned a lot today. Very thankful that you were able to speak with me, Kia. I always appreciate to hear your thoughts, and especially as a young Black designer learning, growing, I really appreciate to see someone out there like you. It helps me to really feel like, hey, I can get there too.
My pleasure. No, it was my pleasure. I love the PA East chapter, and I'm going to give it my always kind of my ASID sell, right? ASID was probably one of the most pivotal design decisions that I've made. It's been so amazing to my career. And people always ask, well, what can ASID do for me? How can it help me? When you should really change that question is, how can you help your profession? You need to be engaged, be involved, use your voice, pick an association. That is how you approach a professional design association. And ASID has been it for me. So I'm grateful to the PA East chapter and just ASID, but get engaged, get involved, stop expecting it to be handed to you. Do the work for your profession.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Oh, what's this? Oh.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm glad you learned a lot.
Yes,
Allison, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great thoughts. I just wanted to share this one in case everyone didn't see. I think the community approach is great. It's working with narrow-minded superiors. Oh my gosh, the comments just keep coming. But yes, as mentioned, I really appreciate speaking with you today. I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did as well. And yeah, a big thank you from PA ASID East. We're so happy to have you back.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kia. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again for our next series. And please join us for the events that Kim mentioned earlier. Have a nice weekend.
Bye.
Bye.